It's Friday night. This is RY4 Radio live from the deepest south in the UK with Tim Weston and, of course, a usual crew. We have Keef and Rob and, of course, joined now live by a friend of the show, Dr. Farsalinos. Good evening, Dr. Farsalinos.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me once again to your show. It's always been a pleasure coming to your show and discussing things about electronic cigarettes.
That's great. No, you're always welcome. It's always good to have you on. I mean, you put a smile on the face of all the vapors that listen tonight, and there's plenty of them worldwide. We've got people in Australia, Canada, America. What do they call those Scandinavian bits? Finland, Norway. Yeah, everybody's here, and a good contingent from the UK. And for those people who are outside chatting, again, I said I'm sure there are some of you. Get yourself into chat, and then you can get involved more with the show. On tonight's show, we're going to talk about the study that was published yesterday that Dr. Farsalinos has done on. I can't even say the words. What are these things called? I'm going to bring them up so I can spell them out like a child.
Aldehydes.
Aldehydes. Aldehydes. Yes. I was going to do it like a child. It would have been more funny. But,
sorry, Tim.
But aldehydes, and there's been a lot of talk about these for some time, with the study in the New England Journal being published a little while back, and of course, this study is telling the truth. Hence, why you didn't see it all across the newspapers, on the telly, and various other places that all jumped up and down and got excited about the New England Journal publication. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get Dr. F to just take us through. Basically, he was doing this study at the time that the New England Journal one came out, so it's a little bit strange that they took notice of them rather than Dr. F. But of course, there is the politics of getting things published. I'll hand it over to you, Dr. F, and if you want to take us through how you came to do the study, and then just bring us into how it's working out, or how it worked,
yeah.
Should I say.
First of all, we always wanted to do such a study, especially after the Japan story from Professor Kunugita, those Japanese professor who said also that the formaldehyde levels in one of the devices he tested were 10 or 20 times higher than e-cigarettes. So we knew that we were seeing basically a trend of new kind of research, researchers having no idea about e-cigarettes, obtaining new generation devices which have the ability to have adjustable power delivery, either in terms of voltage or wattage, using old generation atomizers, of course, frying the atomizers and getting very, very high levels of aldehydes. So even at that point, we thought that we have to do something about it. As always, there's a problem with the lack of funding. But basically, the study that was published yesterday was performed approximately 2 weeks after the New England Journal of Medicine research paper was published. We tried our best to find some resources and do the study because it was really a matter of urgency. And we needed to clarify things because until now we could reply by discussing about overheating and dry puffs, but that was just a theoretical response without any real data. When you have data to respond, it's much stronger. Yeah. I can say that New England Journal of Medicine rejected the paper that I sent because initially I submitted the paper to New England Journal of Medicine, but they denied to even review it, which I find very strange. And of course, I was, to tell you the truth, I was expecting that because it was in direct contrast with another study that they had accepted. However, from an ethical point of view, I think that they were obliged to accept the paper. Anyway, that doesn't hurt at all. Immediately I sent it to Addiction, but as you see, the peer review process and the editing process from the journals takes a long time. That's why it's now 3 months after we performed the study that the study is published. That's how things are with peer-reviewed medical journals. It takes a long time. But So we knew and we're seeing the trend of using of researchers without understanding vaping, without being in contact with vapors, taking, as I said, new generation devices, combine them with very old atomizers, like the New England Journal of Medicine study. They use the C4 atomizer, which is completely outdated nowadays. So we wanted to measure aldehydes, and we wanted to differentiate what's happening at normal vaping conditions and at dry puffs. Of course, trying to be as close as possible to the point where the dry puffs are generated. So basically we were 1.5 watts difference between normal vaping conditions at 7.5 watts and dry puff conditions at 9 watts. And to tell you the truth, I was really surprised by the results. I was expecting the results to be worse. In terms of, I was expecting to see linear response according to the power levels. That means that perhaps see very low levels at 6 watts, see higher levels at 7.5 watts, and gradually, elevated levels as you increase the power delivery. However, we observed and we repeated the studies 3 times, so it's not just one measurement, and we observed that with the new generation, with the more efficient of the 2 setups that we prepared, we didn't see any linear response in terms of a gradual elevation aldehydes. Aldehydes were basically the same. There were small differences, but nothing really huge. A very small difference between 6 watts and 10 watts. However, with the less efficient setup in the atomizer, we saw that going from normal vaping, when the aldehyde levels were very low, when we went to dry puffs, we saw a huge elevation, more than 50 times elevation in aldehyde levels, and of course further elevation when you were going higher within the dry puff zone, let's say. So I was expecting the very high levels at dry puffs. I was surprised, and it was a positive surprise, of course, that we saw huge differences between normal vaping conditions and dry puffs, and we didn't see a linear response. We saw almost identical levels of aldehydes as you increase wattage, but staying within normal vaping conditions, and the huge sudden spike of a huge elevation in aldehydes once you get into the dry puff zone. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a good thing for vapors, of course. It shows that the vaping, the dry puff condition is basically, it's a natural defense mechanism which seems to work very well, which means that you detect that something is wrong at the point where the aldehydes are getting very high. But to tell you the truth, as I said, I was positively surprised by the results.
Okay. Just a quick question. I mean, somebody in chat has said it's more to do with wicking and airflow, the way these work. Now,
yeah, it's not that simple. It has to do with everything. The design of the atomizer, which incorporates everything. It has to do with wicking, with airflow, with how the coil is wrapped around the wick, how the supply of liquid from the tank to the atomizer head, how effectively it is done. It depends on many things. For example, even the coil thickness plays a major role. When you have the same identical setup, but you have used a different coil thickness. For example, going from 0.2 to 0.3 millimeter diameter coil, you need much more power in order to heat that coil. So just by changing the coil thickness, you need more power in order to have any evaporation. And I mean, very, very simple things change quite a lot the way that the cigarette performs. And I'm almost certain that most researchers who have, basically those who have published all this stuff about aldehydes, don't even understand how the cigarette work. And it will be very difficult for them to understand all these details concerning the use. So we could easily, for example, use different coil thickness. You would see that we would need higher power levels with a thicker coil in order to generate the same temperature and the same vapor production as with a thinner coil. It's simple physics, of course, but very hard for people who have been involved in tobacco research, doing doing some research on tobacco cigarettes. Very hard for them to understand all these things, which are minor details maybe, but they play a big role on how e-cigarettes perform.
Uh-huh.
You got a question there, Rob? Okay.
One thing, the previous study that you referenced, Cosmida, I think it is, et al.
No, the previous study is basically
number 4.
The Jensen study.
Your reference number 4, the one that didn't publish.
Yes,
I think that was the one in the New England Journal of Medicine.
There was, of course, the Cosmida study, which was not so extreme as the Jensen study. The Jensen study, they went from 5 up to 12 watts. But I think even the Cosmida study, although they used lower path duration, still they were using basically a C4 atomizer, which is a top coil atomizer, and they were using it at something around 11 or 12 watts. Well, I can tell you, it's something that we did immediately after the Jensen study was published, but we didn't publish it because it's not something to publish it. We took the exactly same atomizer as Jensen used in his study. So I bought C4 atomizers.
Yeah.
Imagine that I couldn't find a C4 atomizer in the Greek market, so I bought it online from a UK e-shop. And I invited 10 vapors to come and use the C4 atomizers and tell me when they are detecting the dry hits. Well, the Jensen study in New England Journal of Medicine studied the C4 atomizers at 5 volts. I can tell you that no one from the 10 vapors that I invited, no one could vape at voltage levels above 3.6 volts.
Yeah,
everyone was telling me above 3.6, everyone was telling me that they detect dry puffs.
But
so this is a measure of how hard the Jensen study basically overcooked the atomizers.
Now I understand
going
that
from 3.6 to 5 is about doubling the power levels. 3.6 volts was about 6.3 watts in our study, and he used the C4s at 12 watts.
Yeah.
Which, you can ask an experienced vapor who was vaping at the time the C4s were popular. He will tell you that it's impossible. He doesn't have to test it. He will tell you that it's impossible to vape a C4 at 12 watts. Everyone knows that. I mean, if a vapor has tried the C4 2 years ago, he knows that it's impossible to use them at 12 watts. But unfortunately, the researchers don't even care to ask vapors, don't even understand how things are gone. They see that the new generation devices, the batteries, can be adjustable in terms of power delivery, and they think that you can take whatever atomizer you will find on the market and use it at the maximum power that the device gives. Well, that's not true, and it's not happening basically. And even if you are unexperienced, I've generated dry puffs, and I asked a non-smoker just to smell what's coming out, not to inhale anything, but to smell. Put his nose close to the drip tip and smell what's coming out. And even a non-smoker, non-vapor could understand the unpleasant smell of the dry puff without even having the e-cigarette activated. I mean, after generating the dry puff.
Right.
So it's that easy, even for them, to smell it. But they don't do it. It's I don't know why, but they don't do it.
Yeah, my question was actually about, that's where you got the ratio of PG to VG and water and what have you.
Yes, the reason why we chose the liquid we used was based on the Cosmida study, because he found that the worst possible liquid was a combination of PG and VG, yes.
I was wondering, did you do any experiments to see whether it was what the effect of more PG or more VG did?
We didn't.
Okay. Would you be tempted to study that?
Well, it's not that we are tempting. We have designed the protocol for such a study 2 years ago. The problem is that we don't have the funds to do it. it's not a matter of having the idea.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, I think that it's very important research to understand if there are differences between different basic ingredient combinations. And we will eventually do it. But it's a matter of first of doing many studies at the same time, so there is a lack of time. And the second is, of course, the funding issue, which is a problem.
Yeah. I mean, crowdfunding would probably be a way around that, but...
Yeah, but you see, now, I receive a lot of questions about the temperature study, because we haven't released the publication yet. As you see, over the last 1 month, we have published 3 studies. One was the study evaluating the natural extracts of tobacco. The second one was the study on metals, evaluating if the metals that were found in 2 previous studies were of any health concern. And the third was this one. All the studies were performed during this period. And I have also another study. 2 more studies are currently under review. So people must understand that, okay, we do a crowdfunding for a study, but we're not using the time we have only for one study. We are doing multiple experiments at the same time. So based on what we think is more important or more convenient for the labs, we adjust our schedule. So, for example, we had to stop everything and dedicate ourselves to the formaldehyde study after the New England Journal of Medicine paper, because we thought it is very important to respond to this study as soon as possible. So we are adjusting constantly our schedule, and this is why any publication or results on the temperature of evaporation has been delayed.
Right.
The experiments are being performed, but it's not that the whole team is working only on one experiment. We have many things that we are working at the same time. So the progress is small, but small in several protocols. And that's how we progress. Otherwise, we wouldn't have published 28 publications within the last 2.5 years. At this point, we thought that the formaldehyde study was of a major priority. The reason was that we were expecting more people to come out using high power levels, inefficient atomizers, finding huge levels of formaldehyde. We know that these things are irrelevant. Now we have data to prove that they are irrelevant to realistic and normal use. But, unless you provide data and evidence for that, it's very easy to just criticize something by saying, no, you are wrong because this doesn't happen. But when you have the data to prove it, it's undisputable then.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Does that cover it, Rob? Do you reckon?
It does, yes. I think so. It also covers my second question, in fact, which is about the temperature control study. So
yeah, be patient. We are working on that. We are going to release... Basically, the formaldehyde study was part of this. Because, as we mentioned in the crowdfunding, we used money basically from the crowdfunding for this. What we were saying in the crowdfunding is that we want to evaluate the end result of the temperatures, which is aldehyde emissions. Now, what we did is that we have measured the temperatures at the study of formaldehyde emissions that we published, so we know at which temperatures we are seeing all these effects, and we are going to publish the data.
Okay.
So we're doing many things at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of cover it. I mean, the wattages you used in the tests. Now, a lot of people who are listening to the show tonight vape at far higher wattages than were covered. I mean, does the higher wattages increase the?
It's not a matter of wattage. That's what our study showed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter the wattage. Okay, we tested at 10 watts, but you couldn't vape the single wick setup at 10 watts. It generated dry puffs. Now, we could have made both setups more efficient so that they could work at 12 or at 15 watts. Or we could use another atomizer that could work at 15 or 20 watts. This was the choice that we did at that time. That were the atomizers, and I want to thank Svomniesto because they sent us 10 Keef lights for the study, and we acknowledge that, and we thank them also in the publication because it was their kind contribution for free from the German manufacturer, German designer, I suppose, that it's SM Tech, the company from Germany, who gave us 10 K funds. So we had these atomizers in hand. We could use them. And, you know, we used a very inefficient, a single wick, which was made of silica, barely touching the bottom of the atomizer head. So, because we deliberately wanted to generate dry puffs. Now, if we take another new generation device, for example, a Kanger sub-tank or Atlantis, Aspire Atlantis, who use cotton as a wick, who have very thick coils, you cannot even produce any vapor at 10 watts with these devices. So you need something higher. And that's why this is a different story. It doesn't matter that we've tested 10 watts, but the people should understand that it is at 10 watts that we found, and even at 9 watts that we found the dry puff phenomenon generating. If they had the same equipment, they wouldn't be able to vape at anything more than 7.5 watts. It's just that we prepared the atomizer to be ineffective.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
as I said, that's not the end. That's just the beginning of the studies on aldehydes. We are going to expand, and we are going to test even at 20 watts, but with atomizers that can can withstand, and can handle 20 watts.
Yeah.
It would be useless to use the K-Fun setups that we used at 20 watts.
Yeah. No, I mean, I personally have a Kanger sub-tank on at 25 watts because below that it doesn't seem to be working properly as far as I'm concerned.
We recently did a study. We evaluated some nicotine delivery to the from the liquid to the aerosol, and I used a Kanger sub-tank, and yes, we couldn't generate any vapor below 15 watts, so we tested it at 15 and 25 watts.
Yeah.
But it's a different story. We also had an Aspire Nautilus, but we didn't test that at 25 watts, of course. We tested that at 7 and 10 watts because that's how they are used. Yeah. So it depends on the atomizer. You cannot use the setups that we were using at anything above 9 or 10 watts.
Yeah, we have a question from chat, actually.
Have we? Yes.
Do any of the sweeteners that industry may be using in juice have an adverse concern when it comes to e-liquid, as far as you're concerned?
If they are using carbohydrates as sweeteners, carbohydrates, when they are heated, they generate acetaldehyde. And that's not good.
Yeah.
So if they are using sweeteners in terms of carbohydrates, sugar or fructose, glucose, whatever else, they will probably generate a lot of acetaldehyde. Because when you heat carbohydrates, you make acetaldehyde, which is a toxic aldehyde.
The same would apply, I assume, to sucralose, because that's another carbohydrate.
It could be also.
Yeah. Right.
These are very nice protocols, and we know that we have to do them. It's very easy to just take a liquid and add some sucralose yourself and do the experiment. But lack of time and lack of funding makes it impossible to do all these things, in a reasonable period of time. We need to be patient.
Yeah. It's about prioritization, isn't it, really, Doctor?
It is. And I think one of the priorities now, and unfortunately we don't have the funds, is to repeat the Diacetyl study.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most manufacturers have shied away from that, though, because of all the coverage it got in the press and all the bad press it got. Supposedly they're not using it.
There's a follow-up. There's a follow-up question. Is ethyl maltol going to be better?
I don't think that ethyl maltol would be really problematic.
Right.
I mean,
it is a widely used flavoring compound. It was used, even before the cigarette was made. But as I said, there is a problem with flavors, meaning that there is a lack of understanding of how flavors react on high temperatures and what's going on. So all these things are very interesting questions that can be resolved through research. Ethyl maltol by itself I don't think that there's any issues with it. We don't know, not only for ethyl maltol, but for many other chemicals, if there are some reactions or some heat decomposition happening which can generate something else. And I told you, for example, the example of carbohydrates like glucose, fructose, sucrose, which can theoretically, because no one has measured that yet, but they can theoretically be transformed into acetaldehyde when they are heated. So this is, okay, we have some idea, but still we need to see if this is happening in reality, because theory from reality, sometimes there's a big gap between theory and what's happening in reality. So this is just a theoretical discussion because we don't have evidence. And I think that we will have eventually, but it's going to take time because we don't have unlimited funding, we don't have unlimited time, and we don't have enough people working on so many different experiments at the same time.
Keith, you got any questions before we do a quick musical break? Give them a chance to get their breath back.
Well, the only thing I would like to ask really is, even with all these aldehydes that are being produced in e-cigarettes, I mean, even with the sweeteners that you mentioned, are they any worse than smoking lit tobacco?
The level of first of all, let's discuss about toxic aldehydes, because vanillin, for example, the major chemical responsible for the vanilla flavor, is also an aldehyde, but it's not a toxic aldehyde. So not all the aldehydes are toxic. Benzaldehyde is very, very commonly used as an almond, giving an almond, flavor. It's not. It is an aldehyde, but it's not toxic. So let's discuss about the toxic aldehydes, which are basically those that we studied. There are a few more, like croton aldehyde, which they have never been found in e-cigarettes, so we didn't measure them at all. But mainly when we talk about toxic aldehydes, we're talking about the 4 aldehydes that we studied. These are the main toxic aldehydes. So it's like alcohol. Ethanol, everyone is drinking ethanol with, beer, whiskey, wine, everything. It's not toxic. But methanol, which is only one carbon less, is highly toxic, and it's not recommended for any human use. So you see, aldehyde is a very large group of chemicals. It doesn't mean that every aldehyde is dangerous in the same way as formaldehyde is, for example. That's not the case. So let's talk about the toxic aldehydes, which are mainly formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, acrolane, and acetone.
Yeah.
Okay. I just had a question flash by me in chat and I've lost it.
Well, there's one from Radian. Is that the one?
That's the one, yeah. I've lost it on my screen.
Can Dr. Farsalinos explain how the Formaldehyde study got past the ethics committee when persons involved are directly interested in the experiments?
I didn't quite understand the second part of the question.
I'll repeat it. Can you explain how the Formaldehyde study, not yours, the New England Journal of Medicine one, I think.
That one.
Get past the ethics committee when the people involved were directly interested in the experiments, in the results?
They didn't ask for ethics committee because there were no humans involved in that study.
Right.
When it's just a chemical study, you don't ask for ethics committee.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I think that's what you meant. Yeah.
I think that's what it was. That was the one. Also, I mean, with composition of e-liquids. Now, when I first got into vaping, I was quite friendly with the guys at IntelliSig, and they produced their liquid just from VEG with ethyl maltol in it, and they seem to think the science behind that made it pretty much the safest juice on the market. It was just VG diluted with a bit of water and ethyl maltol. I mean, is that something that will fly? Has it got legs, as they say?
I think that the simplest the flavor, the more likely it's going to be as safe as it can get.
Yeah.
That's not anything scientific, it's common sense, basically.
Yeah.
The less compounds you have in a flavor, the more likely it's going to be harmless. So my first advice to vapers, back in late 2011, 2012 was use as little flavoring as possible. Yeah. Because most probably we will not ever have an issue with PG, VG and with nicotine. We will probably have, if we have some issues, it's going to be with some flavors.
Yeah.
Not all of them, of course. Probably a minority of them, but we don't know right now.
I mean, I think a lot of the people that make juices, a lot of the juice companies, they don't really look too far into the science. They just literally pop a few ingredients into a pot, give it a shake, and if it tastes good, it then becomes a juice with a silly name. And
yes, because this is how I don't blame the manufacturers. I blame the vapors themselves. When someone is looking only at the taste, quality, and don't see anything beyond that, well, I think that the manufacturers are going to follow what the customers want. If the customers don't like the taste of a liquid that was removed from the market and changed in formulation to remove diacetyl, and they leave and they go to another manufacturer where they don't know if the liquid contains or not diacetyl, but they just like the flavor, then I think it's going to be tempting for a manufacturer to go back and reintroduce diacetyl into the liquids. I mean, because although he's doing the right thing, he's losing customers. So who is there to blame? The manufacturers or the consumers? I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I mean, the customers do demand all these interesting flavours. I mean, we've got a whole load of flavours that my nephew and I have been playing with, which are American flavours, and they're all really based around custard and sweetness. And to be honest, they're a lovely vape. But I said to my nephew, I said, we don't know what's in those. They could be full of diacetyl or anything nasty to make them so wonderful. And yeah, it could well be that the vapors are the irresponsible party demanding the flavours from the manufacturers. But the manufacturers, in my mind, should be able to stand there and go, well, actually, we can't make that flavour because we're going to have to put that in it and that in it, which isn't good for you. You know.
Well, yeah, but it makes sense, of course. But, you know, when they are seeing that they are losing customers and they go to somewhere else where they just don't know, it seems that many people believe that not knowing is better than knowing. Unfortunately.
I think I'd like to know what I'm vaping. I mean, 9 out of 10 times I do, but I'd like to know if I was putting on something that wasn't quite good for me. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick 5-minute breather. Going to pop a couple of tunes on, and we'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes or so. And don't forget, if you've got some questions, pop them into chat. And as long as the chat doesn't go past too quickly, one of us will cop hold of the questions and we'll get them onto Dr. F. It's RY4 Radio. It's 10 after 10 on your Friday night. This is the lock-in, and here is a little bit of AC/DC. There you go. Billy Joel, still rock and roll to me. I feel Radio 2 about that one. It's RY4 Radio. It's 19 after 10 on your Friday. This is the lock-in with Rob, Keef, and of course our special guest, Dr. Farsalinos, friend of the show. Now, we've grabbed ourselves a few questions from chat, and guys, you are asking lots of questions, so I mean, keep them rolling. We will try and grab them as they come past. There's plenty of you in there tonight, and I'm going to sort of lead with the question that when I've brought it back on the screen. It's a question from Charlene Hayes. It says, can Dr. F maybe tell us where else in the normal course of the day we are exposed to formaldehydes? In layman's terms, perhaps.
Yeah. Formaldehyde is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Everyone is exposed to formaldehyde every day. Formaldehyde is one of the most commonly used and most produced chemicals worldwide. It is present everywhere, on the walls, through the painting, on the furniture, on the floors, everywhere. Basically everywhere. That's why we always do studies when we are measuring formaldehyde. We always measure the formaldehyde in the room air, because there is formaldehyde in room air. So we don't want to overstate the results when we are testing formaldehyde emissions from an e-cigarette or even from tobacco cigarettes. That's why we always take blank samples, and blank samples means drawing air from the environment, and we subtract those results from the results we are finding from the product we are testing. So formaldehyde is one of the most abundant chemicals worldwide. It's present in every house, in every closed space, but this doesn't mean that we need to be additionally exposed through e-cigarettes. So, the less the better, of course. But the levels we found from e-cigarettes are basically of no concern, so I wouldn't be worried, at least for what we tested in the study.
Mm-hmm. Does that? I mean, there was a quick question there. Does that mean a non-smoker exhales formaldehyde? If we're breathing it in, we're all breathing it out, I assume.
Sorry.
The question was: does a non-smoker exhale formaldehyde? I mean,
formaldehyde is also Of course, you are not exposed to the exhaled formaldehyde from also from a non-smoker, from every human basically, but the levels are so small and they are so diluted in the environment that you're not getting any second-hand exposure just from the exhaled breath of a human. But it is one of the chemicals that is detected in exhaled breath of non-smokers. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Rob, over to you, mate.
Next question. Hang on.
Yeah.
Scroll up. What does Dr. F think of the latest toxicologic data published in Time magazine? Flavours bad, cough reflex suppressed.
Yeah. The bad flavors, I think, included banana, cinnamon, and menthol. If I remember well, there was a report. Right, yeah. It was not a published study; it was an abstract in a conference. Now, imagine they classify menthol as non-toxic, as toxic, while there are asthma medications which have menthol inside. It's so funny. I think they should have been more careful before reporting that. And I will give you a link of the medication that contains. It's called Aerobid, and it contains menthol, and it's an asthma medication. It's an anti-asthmatic. So I'll give you the link, and you can go and check it yourself. So come on, I have stopped a long time ago. I stopped commenting on cell studies. In cell studies, we have found we are finding miracle cures for cancer and cardiovascular disease every day, and from all these thousands of discoveries, nothing works on humans. Moreover, a cell culture cannot develop emphysema, like the latest study who said that e-cigarettes can lead to emphysema. They are just evaluating one of the many and very, very complex mechanisms which eventually over time may lead to emphysema. And just by evaluating one mechanism and finding that, you see, there are some protein changes, it doesn't mean that this is emphysema. It's not even the single mechanism which leads to emphysema. It's one of the many, many complex factors and complex procedures leading eventually to emphysema. So, the universities are clever. They are finding a very, very easy way of getting publicity by saying that they found something bad about e-cigarettes. It's unprecedented, and you don't see in any other scientific subject, you don't see press statements and press releases from universities about such studies which are completely irrelevant to human effects. So that's what's happening. So there's no point in losing your time with that kind of studies.
I mean, on the flip side of it, I have a customer at my shop. When she first came in, she was attending a COPD clinic every sort of fortnight. She was quite unwell, and she was a smoker at the time. And after, this is the gospel truth. She's moved on. She's using an e-cigarette now. Obviously, she's not got any better, but she hasn't got any worse, and the clinic she was attending has now discharged her, and she only has to go back for a 6-month review, as opposed to being there every couple of weeks. So, I mean, it's got to say something for the e-cigarette against the cigarette.
Well, when we have a published study on humans finding that asthmatics who switch from tobacco to e-cigarettes exhibit a subjective and objective improvement, if I was a researcher finding doing studies on cells and finding something that implies that you're going to develop asthma or COPD, I would be very careful publishing these studies while there is a human study which directly contradicts these findings. I would be very hesitant in publishing something like that. But they don't care at all. They just publish it and they get a lot of publicity from it.
Yeah, no, they do. Have we got another question? Another new one up there?
Yes. We've got a question from Edward A. Wolf. Should polycarbonate ever be used in tank designs because they leach BPA, and polypropylene and glass do exist?
I think that's a major step forward, the use of Pyrex glass. And I don't think there's a need to go backwards. Moreover, I think that one of the issues that needs to be discussed and probably changed is the bottling issue. I don't think that currently the plastic bottles that are used for e-liquids are appropriate for e-liquids. They leak, they lose a lot of nicotine. I'm sure there are plasticizers going into the liquid. The liquids are not really neutral. They have extreme high pH levels. They have nicotine which can be corrosive on the plastic. I don't think that the plastics used are appropriate. And I think that this is something that needs to be seen by the industry, taken care of within a reasonable time. It's not something that is creating any urgent issues. It's not a diacetyl issue, for example. But eventually I think that they should move towards better materials like glass. I wouldn't say metals because it's going to be very, very impractical to use metallic bottles, but glass I think is a very good idea with some, of course, disadvantages like the weight and being fragile. But for the atomizers, I think it's a big step forward that most atomizers now are Pyrex glass and there is no need to go back.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
Now, there was previously a question about the ethics committee, and let me explain to the people that we didn't ask vapers to vape consistently over dry puffs. We basically asked them to tell us when they first detected dry puff. So at maximum, we asked them to take 4 puffs in order to make sure that maybe the first puff, which starts from an environmental temperature, may not generate dry puff, but the second would. But we didn't ask them to continuously vape with dry puffs all the time. We just asked them, and it was not really, we didn't ask them to tell us when the flavor is completely disgusting. We just asked them to tell us when they feel the change in the taste that is going to, that means that this is a dry puff. So we didn't torture the vapors that we used in our study.
No vapors were hurt during the study.
No.
Oh dear. I've got a question here that's popped up on my mobile, and it's to do with the use of new metals in coils. Now, there's a new breed of coil turning up made in titanium. Is this going to pose any problems, do you think, over the metals we're already using?
Titanium is probably one of the safest options because you avoid nickel and chrome, which are not really good. But there is a potential issue with development of titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide may be developed and cover the metal coil during the first few activations and heating cycles, but we are not sure if this is emitted to the aerosol, because that's what's important. The important thing is whether you are seeing titanium dioxide coming to the vapor. Also for the other metals, the important thing is whether chrome from the coil goes to the vapor, or whether nickel from the coil goes to the vapor. I suspect they are. Once again, I want to suggest and advise everyone, and not only the simple vapors, but also the people who are doing reviews on e-cigarettes, do not overheat the coils. It's one of the worst things that you are doing, is to burn the coil until it's getting red, just in order to fix it, to tighten the wraps, to make them whatever, to see if the heat transfer is homogeneous between the coil wraps. It's the most disastrous thing that you're doing, because when you are heating the metal to the point that it's glowing red, you are basically destroying the bonds between the metal molecules, and then you are greatly facilitating the emission of metals from the coil into the vapor. It's the worst thing that you can do. And I'm seeing every single reviewer doing the same thing over and over and over again. You are destroying the metal structure, period. Just by doing it once, you are destroying the metal structure. You shouldn't do it. If you want to clean the coil because there may be some oil from the production process and so on, go and use water, alcohol, before preparing the coil itself. Just when you're taking just when you're cutting it from the rod, just use water or any alcohol. I would even say acetone. You can use it, and then of course clean it with water. But don't overheat it to the point that they are glowing red. It's the worst thing that you're doing. You are completely destroying the metal structure.
That's one of the things I was probably doing earlier on then, when I was recording.
Well, that's a thing that I consistently see every single reviewer doing. And a lot of people are watching the reviewers in order to know how to use these cigarettes, especially the rebuildable ones, and they are following them very closely. And it's the biggest mistake that you can do. Overheat the coils until they're glowing red. Doing it only once is enough.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions that came out of that was, isn't Canthal good up to 1500 degrees before it starts to go a bit funny?
Before it starts melting. You don't have to melt it to destroy it, you know. It's happening much earlier.
To be honest, also now, I mean, I do see a lot of these rebuildable tanks are coming with you can actually buy pre-wound coils on a piece of cotton, and you do not have to heat those at all. You just pop them into your build deck, and literally squirt the liquid on and vape away. I think that might be the way forward, and they're not squashed together. They're very tight coils, but they work.
Yeah, but you don't know during the production whether they have overheated them like you do on your daily.
Yeah, they're still shiny when you get them out the bag. They're still shiny, so they haven't lost any of their colour or anything. They don't look like they've been dry burnt. So I don't know. This is something. I mean, as I say, I do on a daily basis. I'm sure the guys, when they're making their coils for their drippers or whatever, I'm sure they're pulse heating them, squeezing them together, so they get.
Well, I've done it because I've seen people on YouTube videos doing it in tutorial videos. So I've done it myself because I thought that was the right way to do it.
Yeah, me too.
Same here.
Well, it may be a convenient way to make the coil better, but it's not. You're destroying the structure of the metal. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, I'm learning it here myself, and I'm sure you guys as well. The Kuro coiler has dramatically reduced the need to squish coils together whilst heating them. Yep, I agree there, because I'm one of those which I use.
Yep.
Somebody else saying clean coils post-wind with alcohol and stop dry burning them. The message is arriving in chat. It's all there.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's not destroy the structure of our metals ever again. I should have to tell my nephew this in the morning because he loves to wind up twisted canthal and burn it till it's absolutely white hot. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
There's a question that I see about organic liquids.
That's the one,
Yes, that's the one.
In my opinion, if someone needs to be concerned about something in relation to flavors, the first thing you should be worried about is organic flavors and organic extracts. And there's a simple reason. Many people think that organic extracts are natural products, so they are much better. Well, they are much better to eat them. They are not at all better to inhale them, because all these extracts have been made to be ingested. And the extracts contain a lot of other chemicals besides the flavoring molecules that you are also inhaling. Perhaps they may be nutritious or good to ingest them, but for example, when you have a lot of proteins that are coming out from a plant where you create the natural extract, it's not a very good idea to inhale proteins, long chain amino acids and so on. It's not a good thing. And I think that if we want to, if we're about to worry about some of the flavorings, the first thing we should look at, after of course diacetyl and acetylpropionil, is organic liquids, organic flavorings. I'm not saying that they are all bad. I'm saying that it is a reason of concern.
Yeah, okay, that works for me. We're changing the face.
It's something that I said, that I have said 2 years ago. It's not something new. We don't have data. We cannot say don't use them. We cannot recommend anything based on evidence, but we have every reason to think that not all of them, but perhaps some of them may be problematic.
Right, absolutely. So So I'm looking there at nickel metal coils. What's the thought? So I think we've covered this before on a show here, the nickel metal coils.
Nickel is a well-known toxic chemical, toxic metal, like chrome is in nichrome, like chrome is in canthal. The thing is whether there are any nickel emitted to the aerosol from the coil. It seems from the studies published until now that some is emitted, but there are no studies evaluating nickel coils by themselves. So we don't know. Because the thing is not what the coil is made of. The thing is if you are getting anything on the aerosol from the coil. Otherwise, if it stays on the coil, it doesn't matter. The problem is that we don't have studies, so we don't know yet. In any case, the coils is, as I said, probably 1.5 years ago, is one of the big unknowns.
Yeah. What about?
And it's a pity, because we could study and we could find what is the best coil, or 2 or 3 options, and we could choose. And it would be easy for the industry to follow. It would be cost effective. It wouldn't cost anything, basically, because going from one coil to the other doesn't make a difference in terms of price. But
what about ceramic? What about ceramic discs? I mean, there was a big thing about them a little while back. People were using the little ceramic discs, which obviously have a coil inside the ceramic. Is that something which would be better?
It might probably be better, because at least you are covering the coil, and you don't have a direct contact with between the liquid and the metal. You know, metal also acts as a catalyst and accelerates the oxidation of the liquids and the components. But I think there were some issues with the low rate of temperature elevation. You needed a lot more time to heat, basically, the liquid and evaporate it, because, of course, ceramic acts as a sort of an insulator. Yeah. So I think that's why they weren't used on a broad basis. I haven't tried that. I haven't seen one myself. I saw some on the internet at that period, some information, but I didn't have the chance to test it myself.
I'm going to swing the subject round a little bit. and this was something that was brought up again a couple of years ago. It was to do with the absorption of vitamins in e-cigarette liquid, and I think it was Tom from Aceta that he commented on that a few years ago, and just saying that the lungs weren't capable of absorbing the vitamins. Is that something that's real?
Well, we don't know if they are or they're not. That means that we don't know if they can absorb or not. But I think that they are not made to absorb vitamins or anything like that. And moreover, I don't see a reason for anyone to take vitamins unless they have specific vitamin deficiency. I think the food supplement industry is worse regulated than the non-regulated cigarette industry, to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. There are some major issues there, and I think that I don't see a point inhaling more and more stuff, adding vitamins or whatever someone may think.
Yeah.
And it's still unproven whether you are getting anything of that.
Yeah, true.
We don't know.
I mean, I've vaped liquids with caffeine in before, and whether it's just me thinking to myself, yes, that's working or not, it did sort of wake me up a little bit one morning at Vape Fest last year. Sort of 13 milligram caffeine juice. Is that under the same sort of umbrella? Do you think would be the same as vitamins, or is it? I'm just
caffeine is
it's working.
It's not a vitamin. It's something different.
Yeah.
And still, we don't know how much caffeine is absorbed. I know that there are some other inhaler stuff containing caffeine. We don't really know how much of it is absorbed.
Okay, that's cool. Guys, you got any questions there?
There's this question about the Oswald Hope Robertson papers that I'm not entirely clear on. There was a link in.
Yes, it's the paper about PG safety.
Right.
And yes, I have read the paper from 1947. I have it. Mm-hmm. And they evaluated in primates, in monkeys, I think, for 18 months. The effects of breathing into an atmosphere which is fully saturated with PG aerosol. And they found no adverse effects.
Okay. Keith, you got any questions under your fingertips?
No, I mean the last points that you were making, Tim, that covered the last question that I've got in our chat, which was from John Downey, that said, what is your opinion about additives in e-liquid?
Yeah, okay, that's cool.
Listen, let's not forget that the e-cigarette is used as a smoking substitute. Now, I don't see a reason why we should start adding things which don't basically have an effect as a smoking substitutes. And I wouldn't recommend making the e-liquids more complicated than they are.
No, I totally agree.
I don't think that by adding a vitamin, it will be better in keeping you off smoking. Will it?
Yeah.
I suppose not.
No, I totally agree with you there, Doctor.
We were all quite happy with our cigarettes, weren't we? At the end of the day, we were all quite happy with our cigarettes, and making the change over to this, yes, shouldn't be any different from what it gives us to the cigarettes. I mean, I know the flavours are a big thing for a lot of people, but it is one of those things that has taken a lot of us away from cigarettes. And there was something published, I think it was probably in the Daily Fail or the News of the World this week. Not News of the World, Daily Mirror. That was talking about a survey that had been done on people that had gone from cigarettes to e-cigarettes, and at the end of the day, 60% of people after 3 months, I think it was, were going back to smoking cigarettes. I mean, I don't see that trend at all here with my customers. I have the odd one that thinks they can vape zero nicotine juice after 2 weeks and still stay on the fags. But I don't know. What does everybody else think? I'm Dr. F. Is this a trend that you've seen or agree with, or is it something that you've not heard of so far?
What trend? Can you repeat?
It's saying that a large proportion of people who use an e-cigarette to get themselves off of tobacco, after 3 months, revert to cigarette smoking?
Well, unfortunately, for the majority of people, e-cigarettes don't work.
Yeah,
but it would be interesting for most smokers. I mean, it would be interesting to understand the reasons why they don't work. What kind of device are they using? Are they willing to use any new generation devices?
No.
How many of them tried?
They're using Cigalikes, basically. They're using Gen 1 Cigalikes. So
exactly. So it's a matter of the efficiency of the devices. We know that not all devices are equally effective. And of course, we know that Cigalikes don't really work. No. Moreover, the smokers need to understand that they may have to try different type of liquids or even different type of devices before they find something that fits their own preference. So if the smoker is not educated, basically, and he thinks that the e-cigarette is another type of tobacco cigarette, get a pack, get a lighter, and that's it. Of course, he will be disappointed. So they need to be educated. The e-cigarette, unfortunately, is much more complicated than the tobacco cigarette. So without being educated to know what you expect and to know how you should approach the product, most likely it will fail.
Most people are popping up in chat saying most Cigalike users do come into the shops and afterwards are enlightened and happy, which is absolutely right.
Yes, but there are many people who are using Cigalikes who don't even know that there are other devices out there.
No, that's very, very true. I mean,
they don't search on the internet. They don't care to search on the internet. They just go to a C-store or to a supermarket. They get whatever they find there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the supermarkets and convenience stores now are stocking C4 systems.
Which 2 years ago.
Better, but they're stocking them now. But it doesn't work. I mean, we get a lot of people in our shops that will come in with something they bought from Tesco or the local cost cutter. And the first thing I do with it is throw it in the bin and say, "This is what you need." But yeah, you should see some of their faces. It's a picture. It really is. Someone's typing away furiously there. Is there any more questions?
Sorry, that's me. Oh, yes, there's a few in chat.
Yeah, go. Grab them.
Yeah. So, where are we?
There is a question about 50% of biomedical studies cannot be replicated. And is this fight scientific or political? Well, basically, we all know that this is a political fight, but without science, we would definitely lose the political battle. And I'll give you a characteristic example. The EU originally proposed that liquids should contain maximum 4 milligrams per milliliter. The only way of changing their mind was by citing my first study, which found that on e-cigarette vapor, to get the similar amount to a tobacco cigarette, you need at least 20 milligrams per milliliter. And that saved basically the cigarette, because we know that with 4 milligrams per milliliter, no one would be able to quit smoking. The flavor story, you know that until the last month, they were about to ban all flavors besides tobacco and menthol. And again, it was the survey on flavors that saved the flavors from ban on the European regulation. So, whether we like it or not, the only way to fight it politically is through science. And in fact, to tell you the truth, we need to produce 10 times more evidence than the opponents in order to be able to convince the politicians. And it's not something weird. It's happening everywhere. If you want to prove that something is good, you need a lot of evidence to satisfy and to convince the politician or the rest of the scientific community. If you are thinking that something is bad, you need only few data to be convinced that something is bad. So the approach towards the negative, and it's a matter of human psychology, the approach towards the negative is much more easier than the approach towards the positive. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, It is a political battle that can be fought only through science. There is no other way.
Yep.
It has worked pretty well in the UK, I can say.
It has. It's worked quite well in the UK, definitely. Okay.
But it needs more.
Yep. Have we got a few last-minute questions? We're getting close to the top of the hour, and we know how pissed he gets if we don't let him in.
Has any dramatic harm or risk been proven, or is it simply a case of this is a possible danger, so we should avoid it? Very nice question.
Yeah, it is.
So,
it's a tough one, isn't it?
the diacetyl issue is an issue indeed, coming from observations that NIOS has made, and they have set some safety levels in the occupational setting. Now, I would prefer not to wait until it becomes a real issue with the cigarettes, because that will also be the end of the cigarettes. I've heard a lot of arguments that diacetyl is not a proven risk or danger for the lungs and so on. Well, when they say it's not proven yet, they mean that we haven't asked volunteers to go and use diacetyl containing liquids or diacetyl containing other stuff to inhale them for a few years and observe how many develop disease. Well, this is basically something that will never happen. You cannot randomize a group of people into some that are going to inhale diacetyl every day and some others who will not. We cannot do that. So basically that kind of proof that some people are asking will never happen. But this is not how science works. If it was like that, we would be 100 years back in medicine. We have to accept that based on current evidence, diacetyl and acetylpropanol are problematic. Yeah. Now, I don't think that we need to wait to have an epidemic of lung disease. And I'm not talking about bronchiolitis obliterans, which is very rare. I'm talking about a reduction in lung function that is observed much more frequently in the workers in the food flavoring industry compared to the general population. We don't need something like that in vaping in order to be alerted. And I don't see a reason for anyone to use diacetyl. And I'm sure that if someone knows that there is diacetyl inside, he will not use it. Well, if someone wants to, I wouldn't mind. It's his problem. But my advice is that people should know, so that the people who don't want to inhale diacetyl, they should know that the liquid contains diacetyl. So let the consumer decide for himself.
Yeah.
It is very, very responsible behavior to have the manufacturer decide for you what you're going to vape, and to trick you because diacetyl has a better taste than the substitutes. That's very interesting, but you should mention that there is diacetyl, and then we're going to see how many are going to vape it. If someone wants to vape knowing that there is diacetyl inside, let him do it. I don't mind at all. But what about me who don't want, for example, to vape diacetyl? Why shouldn't I know?
Very good
Doesn't
point.
make any sense.
Yeah.
So, you want to put diacetyl in your liquid. Okay, as a manufacturer, mention it, so that I can have the right to choose. It's simple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same as the right to smoke a cigarette or not. That's what it comes down to. We all know the dangers of smoking cigarettes, and of course, we choose not to. So it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how many years it takes for diacetyl to destroy your lung tissue, but I'm fairly sure that I don't want to make that choice. I'd like to live a little bit longer. I've spent far too much time in hospital, hooked up to machines in the last few months to think about things like that. It's a good one. Guys, we got ourselves at 5 to 11. Jason's ready to take the air from us at 11 o'clock, so we need to really bring things to a close. And let Jason take you into the small hours with his little eclectic mix of house music. Is there any last-minute things we need to cover before we hand the show over?
Can we?
Yeah, go on, Rob.
There's Alan Beard's question. Any opinions on proposed reclassification from Dutch regulators re the toxicity of nicotine from Class 3 to Class 1? What would the consequences of this be?
The consequence is going to be pretty much nothing, because I think it will only change the liquids containing more than 11 or 12 milligrams from harmful when inhaled to toxic when inhaled, but it's going to be a very, very nice argument for the opponents, advocating to people that they are inhaling a fatal substance. So it's going to be mostly used for propaganda. And of course, people who inhale nicotine through e-cigarettes and don't have any adverse effects will not have any adverse effects because they will not now have adverse effects because the EU decided to change the classification. It's the same substance. So it is based on irrelevant experiments on animals, which are not really associated with human exposure. And, we know that using nicotine with e-cigarettes as intended, I mean through inhalation, not by drinking the liquids, no one is going to get any harm. So who cares about the labeling? It is, however, going to be used as a propaganda, basically for the smokers to be discouraged from using e-cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I predict, basically.
Okay. I think we're going to have to draw things to a close there. I hope that we've covered everything that went through chat tonight, and of course we've covered Dr. F's recent study that was published yesterday, and we've got a bit of a new understanding about glass bottles, plastic bottles, coils, winding and stuff like that, which I'm sure you guys are tweeting like mad all around the place. So that'll be viral tomorrow. I'd like to thank Dr. Farsalinos for joining the show once again. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and we just don't seem to have enough hours in the day to get everything in. And I'm sure you'll come back very shortly and join us again one Friday evening.
Thank you very much once again.
No problem.
And it's always a pleasure discussing with you about any new issues concerning e-cigarettes.
Yeah, that's absolutely fabulous. That's friend of the show, Dr. Farsalinos. Keith and Rob, first time on with the Doctor?
Yes, indeed. It's quite an experience, I'll tell you that.
Definitely.
Yeah, very, very, very enjoyable.
Huge thanks.
No, it's one of those things. I mean, it's a great show. It goes out all over the world. With the listeners tonight go into the hundreds. The show has been recorded by more than one person, I'm sure. So it will turn up all over the place on Facebook, YouTube, and of course on our Mixcloud site as well in the next 48 hours. So for those people that had a friend that missed out, you can point them in the right direction. This has been RY4 Radio. It's been the lock-in. It's been your Friday night. And we are back with you next week, hoping to get a friend of mine on next week. Who knows what can happen in a week? We'll try. Even Johnny Lavery's turned up. Good evening, Johnny. Long time no speak. We'll get you on, my Irish little friend. I'm going to play a song. Jason Weston's going to be taking over, taking you into the small hours with a little collection of dance tracks, and we will catch you probably on Sunday with Andy's show. Keep your eyes on the RY4 Radio site. All the schedules are going to be popped on there, and all the DJs post on there to let you know what's going on. From us all here, good night. Have a great bank holiday weekend in the UK. Just say good night, guys.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Good night, all. That's with our pal. And good night, Dr. Farsalinos.
Yes, good night, Doctor.
Bye, everyone.
Good night. Here we go. Right after this song, you will find Jason Weston with his wheels of steel spinning hard up there in Liverpool.